We are already halfway through the group stage, and the road only gets more difficult. Some teams already seem locked in the round of 16, while others are only playing for CONMEBOL's prize money. No team has looked amazing so far, which leaves the door open for anyone to rise up and win the whole thing. Which is why here in Rank Talks Bowl we're gonna predict all the games in match day 4 of the Copa Libertadores 2025. Botafogo traveled away to La Plata to face a struggling Estudiantes, and despite all of the inconsistencies of the Argentinian team, they still had enough to beat the defending champions. It was a pretty tight affair. Both teams had chances, but it was nothing to write home about. It would have been a 0-0 draw if it wasn't for Guido Carrillo shooting from outside the box and the goalkeeper John Victor letting the ball slip through his hands while trying to make a routine save. This single mistake cost Botafogo the game, and now they have to travel away to Venezuela to play against Carabobo. Dumbface were not as dumb this time around, and they did a great job against group leaders Universidad de Chile. They were awarded a penalty after a foul from Calderón against Berrios, which was converted by Tortoleto to give the home team the lead. However, before the end of the first half, a handball inside the box gave U de Chile a penalty, which was scored by Charles Aranguiz. But Carabobo didn't give in to desperation, and in the second half they barely allowed the Chileans any chances, securing the 1-0 draw. Now they will have to replicate this against the reigning champions, but just because Botafogo is in dire straits, I think that they will go all in for this game, which is why I'm gonna give the win over to the Brazilians, although I'm ready to be disappointed. U de Chile dropped points against the weakest side in the group on paper. Early on, centre-back Calderón missed a huge chance for the Chileans, and it would cost them, as only a few minutes later, Calderón himself would step on the ankle of Berrios inside the box, giving Carabobo a penalty that was scored by Tortoleto. But La U were soon given a penalty of their own after a handball inside the box, and Aranguiz used it to equalize. However, not much else happened in the second half. Still, the draw on the road is very good for U de Chile, who now have to host Estudiantes, who displayed an unimpressive performance against Botafogo, but were still able to win thanks to an oopsie from John Victor, allowing Guido Carrillo to get the only goal of the night. But the Estudiantes side is far away from the level we once saw, and if U de Chile are serious at home, they should have no trouble getting the win. Independiente del Valle keep finding new ways to disappoint me. They played a fantastic first half against River Plate, with Spinelli getting a brace in the span of 7 minutes to give them a comfortable lead at the break. And they seemed to get a bit too comfortable, because in the second half when River came for the jugular they didn't know how to respond. The Ecuadorians were battered against the wrong box, and they were lucky that River could only score twice. If the Argentinians had better finishing, they could have easily turned this game around. IDV dropped the ball once more, and now they have to travel away to Universitario, who surprised me in their visit to Guayaquil against Barcelona, where despite having less of the ball, the Peruvians created the better chances, and after taking the lead in the first half through Edinson Flores, they defended like warriors and secured a massive 3 points on the road, which makes this next game even more difficult to predict. I wanna believe Universitario, especially now that they're at home, but even with their flaws, IDV are still a very solid side, which is why I think this game could end in a draw. This time the looks of Segundo Castillo could not help Barcelona get a result. At home against Universitario they were stunned by El Oreja Flores in the first half, and even though they created some threat, they crashed time and time again against the wall that was the Peruvian defense. Disappointment for El Ídolo, who now have to host River Plate, who are coming on a high after winning El Superclásico against Boca Juniors, and before that they managed to recover from a 2-0 deficit against Independiente del Valle. The Argentinians struggled big time in the first half, but the substitutions from Gallardo paid dividends. Galopo and Driussi scored the goals to tie the game, and if they had better finishing they could have even won. And if they keep riding on this momentum, although I think it's gonna be a close game, I think that River can claim the victory away to Guayaquil. Flamengo struggled in the altitude against Liga de Quito and showed yet another lackluster performance. Besides shots from outside the box, they created very little threat, and they were lucky to have come away from Ecuador with a point. Now they gotta visit their biological fathers in Central Córdoba in a highly anticipated rematch. The Argentinians got the job done early against Deportivo Táchira. Only 4 minutes in, Luis Angulo put Central ahead, and before the 20th minute, Quagliata made it 2-0. They did concede before the end of the first half, but they were never in danger of losing. In fact, they were closer to scoring a third. Either way, they got the win, which is what matters. And now they play at home against Flamengo, and the stakes are super high. Which is why, with the nerves running high, I expect this to be a cagey game, which will end in a draw. Liga de Quito let a great opportunity go at home against Flamengo. They took advantage of the struggling Brazilian team, but despite creating good chances, they weren't able to capitalize. Liga missed the chance to go top of the group, and now they have to travel away to Deportivo Táchira, who only 20 minutes in were already 2-0 down against Central Córdoba. And despite Requena finding a consolation goal before the end of the half, they created nothing in the second, which sees the Venezuelan team bottom of the group with little hope of achieving anything. However, if Liga keep on being this unconvincing, I can see Deportivo Táchira snatching a point away from them in Venezuela. Alianza Lima were having a fantastic game at home against Talleres. Early on, the Peruvian legend Paolo Guerrero put them ahead, and early into the second half he got himself a brace to make it 2-0. However, that's when Alianza Lima realized that the game was going a bit too well and decided to make it interesting for the spectators. First, they conceded a penalty which was scored by Girotti, and 7 minutes later the young striker would appear again, this time with a header, to equalize the game for the Argentinians. The home team added yet another layer of difficulty when in the 82nd minute Zambrano got himself sent off. And with 10 men, Alianza held on and defended against everything that Talleres threw at them until the 5th minute of stoppage time, when a cross found the other Alianza striker that is over 40 years old, Hernán Barcos, inside the box to get the victory for the Peruvians in the most dramatic game we've seen so far. I'm sure the Alianza fans will be hoping for a calmer game now that they gotta host Sao Paulo, who went away to Paraguay to play against Libertad, and after having an awful first half where they created nothing, they turned a gear up for the second, and their main goal scorer Ferreira was able to put them in front in the 62nd minute. However, in the 70th minute, Libertad were awarded a penalty, but Melgarejo ended up wasting it, which kept Sao Paulo in front, and before the end of the game, André was able to get a second to give the Brazilians a more comfortable win. And now this one's a super tough one to call, because both teams have shown that they can be great, but they are also super inconsistent, which is why I'll play it somewhat safe and say that this game will be a draw. Talleres keeps sinking lower and lower in this group. They played horrible for 60 minutes against Alianza Lima and were rightfully 2-0 down. However, they were given a lifeline in the form of a penalty that was scored by Girotti, and a few minutes later the striker appeared again to equalize the game. Things were looking up when Zambrano got sent off with 10 minutes to go, and Talleres began to push and create chance after chance to get the winner. But they went for it by leaving themselves exposed at the back, and one poorly placed pass in the 95th minute allowed Alianza to counterattack and put in a cross for Hernán Barcos to score the dagger and leave Talleres empty-handed. The only upside is that they play at home again, and this time against Libertad. The Paraguayans were very wasteful in their game against Sao Paulo. Despite having less possession, they created better chances, but when the Brazilians began going for it, Libertad found themselves 1-0 down in the second half. That's when they were awarded a penalty, and guys, if you have some time to spare, please look up Melgarejo's penalty, because the no run-up approach into hitting the crossbar was one of the most sickening things I had to watch the past month. After wasting that opportunity, Libertad conceded again, and even playing like that I think that they can damage Talleres. But at home I think that the Argentinians will have some shame and win this game against the team from Paraguay. I will admit I may have jumped into the Atlético Bucaramanga hype train a bit too early. At home against Fortaleza they created some threat through some set pieces, but they still found themselves down in the score after Daverson scored before the 20th minute. In the second half, the Colombians were out of ideas and in 2 opportunities Fortaleza had the chance to make it 2-0. But they kept Bucaramanga in the game, and in the 89th minute they were awarded a penalty which was scored by Luciano Pons for the equalizer. I thought that was the end of the game, but in the 3rd minute of stoppage time, Bucaramanga had a golden opportunity to win the game when Londoño appeared all alone on the far post to receive a cross. But with the goal all to himself and being only 2 yards out, he sent the ball over to Mars, and so the game ended in a draw. Bucaramanga are still top of the group however, and now they gotta host Racing, who conceded early on against Colo-Colo when Lucas Cepeda with a great shot from outside the box gave the Chileans the lead. The game turned cagey and physical after that, and it seemed like it would be difficult for Racing to get an equalizer. However, in the 86th minute, a throw-in landed at the feet of Martín Barrios, who scored to give the Argentinians an important point. And now playing in Colombia, I have absolutely no idea what's gonna happen. This Libertadores has been so hard to predict with every team being so shaky. You know what I'm gonna say, I'm gonna predict this game to be a draw, but I could honestly see this one going either way. Fortaleza played their best game yet, away to Atlético Bucaramanga. In the first half they took the lead when Daverson had his penalty saved, but he was able to score from the rebound. And in the second half they had chances to make it 2-0, but Iago Pikachu ended up hitting the crossbar, and a few minutes later he missed a sitter. And Fortaleza would pay for it, as near the end of the game Bucaramanga equalized through the penalty scored by Luciano Pons. And the Brazilians almost lose the game in the end after the missed opportunity by Londoño in stoppage time. Now Fortaleza gotta host Colo-Colo, who had a great start against Racing after a fantastic goal from Cepeda, but they didn't really create much of anything after that. They proposed the Argentinians a physical game and it seemed to be working, but near the end Barrios found the equalizer, which leaves Colo-Colo in a precarious situation. Especially because CONMEBOL has come out with a resolution to the first game played between Colo-Colo and Fortaleza in Chile, giving Fortaleza a 3-0 win. I'm sure this will be a super heated game because of it, but I feel like in this case the rise tensions will play against Colo-Colo, and I think that at home Fortaleza will be the one to pick up the win. Hipsters rise up because Bahia keep on being the talk of the streets. At home against Atlético Nacional they dominated. The Colombians relied too much on shots from long distance, which were easily contained by goalkeeper Marcos Felipe. However, Bahia's attack was having a tough day in the office. Despite creating many good chances, none of their attackers seemed to have their finishing boots on. That was until the 71st minute when William Jose appeared on the right and scored past Ospina to put the only goal of the night and give Bahia all 3 points at home. Now they gotta host Nacional, who were in Brazil pretty recently when they visited Internacional. The Uruguayans hadn't scored at all in this tournament, and in incredible turn of events, they were 3-0 up 45 minutes in. Right from the start, Millán opened the score from a corner, and 5 minutes later, Luciano Boggio finished an amazing counter-attack to put them 2-0 ahead. And in the 43rd minute, Sebastián Coates scored from another corner to make it 3. However, the game quickly spun out of Nacional's control. Internacional were awarded a penalty that was scored by Alan Patrick to pull one back. The Brazilian team began to knock on the door, hitting the woodwork before the break. Then the second half was all Inter. The Uruguayans couldn't hold on, and after the goals from Bernabé and Fernando, Nacional had to settle for the draw. It was a bit better from Nacional at least, and if they can play like that again, I believe that they can claim another draw away to Bahia. Nothing went well for Internacional in the first half. Only 10 minutes in, they were already 2-0 down against Nacional, and then they had a goal and a penalty disallowed because of offside before conceding a third from a corner. Right after this third goal, however, was when fortunes turned around for the Brazilians. They got a penalty that was scored by Alan Patrick, and then they almost scored a second when Bernabé hit the crossbar. In the second half, Nacional disappeared from the pitch and Inter were able to score a second thanks to Bernabé and then the equalizer with a header from Fernando. Inter had chances to win the game, but considering they were 3-0 down, I doubt they will be mad about the draw. Now they travel away to Colombia to play against Atlético Nacional, who didn't create a single good chance away to Bahia, and they were lucky that José was the only one who was able to score for the Brazilians on the night. Or else they would have lost by a bigger margin. Inter has looked like the better team, but El Verdolaga is a different team playing at home, adding in both factors, and I think that this game could be a draw. If I showed you this shot map, I'd have a hard time convincing you that this team didn't win the game. And yet Cerro Porteño somehow managed that. Not only that, but at home against Sporting Cristal they went 1-0 down after a great goal from Santi González from a counter-attack in the 37th minute. The Paraguayans recovered quickly, and in quick succession Dominguez and Carrizo both scored to turn the game around before the end of the first half. In the second half, however, everything went downhill. Rivas, Dominguez, Iturbe, it seemed like everyone was taking turns missing big chances for Cerro Porteño. And of course, in stoppage time, from a throw-in of all things, Lutiger was allowed to shoot from inside the box and score the equalizer for Sporting Cristal. Heartbreak for Cerro, who now have to play at home against Palmeiras. El Verdao impressed me for the first time this tournament. Against Bolívar in La Paz, they barely held any of the ball, and yet they created many chances, with José López and Estevao giving them a 2-0 lead in the first half. And while the finishing could have been a bit better and Bolívar was able to equalize with a brace from Fabio Gómez, they weathered the storm and managed to find a winner through Mauricio to get all 3 points. A difficult game awaits them in Paraguay, where I expect both teams to be offensive, but in the end it'll even out and it will end in a draw. Bolívar couldn't work their magic this time around. With the advantage of the altitude, they still went 2-0 down in the first half against Palmeiras, first half in which they barely created any chances. In the second half, however, 2 great headers from Fabio Gómez equalized the game for Bolívar. However, Palmeiras still had one more chance left in them, and Mauricio capitalized and scored the dagger that left Bolívar empty-handed. Huge letdown for the altitude merchants, who now return to sea level to play against Sporting Cristal. The Peruvians got the upper hand in a very back and forth first half against Cerro Porteño when González scored a great goal from a counter-attack. However, before the break, Cerro found 2 quick goals to turn the game around, and Sporting Cristal were finding no answers. The second half was all Cerro Porteño, but despite creating chance after chance after chance, they were never able to score a third. And when the opportunity came, Sporting Cristal took it. In the 62nd minute, a throw-in found Rafael Lutiger inside the box to score the equalizer that gives Sporting Cristal an important point on the road. And with how shaky Bolívar are looking, I think this is the Peruvians' time to strike, which is why I will predict the win to go over to Sporting Cristal. Olimpia played a very intense game at home against Peñarol. Under their new manager Fabián Bustos, the Paraguayans had the initiative for most of the game, but despite having multiple shots, not a lot of them resulted in big chances. It was Peñarol, the one who, despite having less of the ball, were creating the better opportunities. The best one being a penalty taken by Leo Fernández that was saved by Olimpia's goalkeeper Lucas Versa. The home team had the chance to win it near the end, but Derlis González missed the target from 5 meters out. Now Olimpia travel away to Argentina to play against Vélez, who managed to score 3 goals in Bolivia, but lost 2-1 against San Antonio. Vélez was the best team throughout the first half, but when they were dominating and it seemed like they would score first, a messy play from a corner ended up in an own goal by Elias Gómez to give Bulo Bulo the lead. The second half was a lot closer, with both teams trading blows. But it would be San Antonio from another corner and with another own goal, this time by Michael Santos to double the lead for the Bolivians. The wonder kid Álvaro Montoro ended up scoring a consolation goal in the 90th minute, but it wasn't enough. Vélez lose a game that they had no right losing because of their own mistakes. However, at home against Olimpia, I feel like they can make up for those mistakes, which is why I will give the win to the Argentinian team. Peñarol proposed Olimpia a counter-attacking game. The Uruguayans sat back and held on for the entirety of the first half, and in the second they had the chance to take the lead when VAR awarded them a penalty, but Leo Fernandez couldn't square his shot, which was saved by Lucas Versa. About 10 minutes later they wasted a very promising 4-on-1 counter-attack, but in the final minutes Olimpia had better opportunities and Peñarol ended up being lucky to come away with a point. The 0-0 draw seems like a fair result, but now Peñarol have to travel to Bolivia to play against Bulo Bulo, which should be renamed to Juju Juju, because after being bailed out by their goalkeeper on the crossbar, they took the lead against Vélez thanks to an own goal. In the second half, the Argentinian team played worse, which allowed San Antonio to create chances by playing haram ball. It was long passes galore. In fact, in the second half, Bulo Bulo attempted only 48 passes and barely completed half of them. And even then, thanks to another corner, they found a second goal with another own goal. And despite conceding in the 90th minute, San Antonio claimed their second win at home in this Libertadores. And Peñarol looked to be the third victim. However, Juju can only take you so far. If we see a more normal game here, yes, you guessed it, this should be a draw. And this is how my predictions are going. Well, it's getting real bad for me now, as I only got 6 correct predictions and 10 incorrect, bringing the total score to 22 correct predictions, thanks to CONMEBOL awarding Fortaleza a win over Colo Colo, and 26 incorrect. I really gotta turn this ship around if I wanna beat my old record. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like, comment your thoughts down below and subscribe to not miss out on any more Copa Libertadores content. I'll be seeing you all next time.